This week, we're traveling back in time to look at the history of the Mason's Mark. Do Freemasons put a secret mark on all things they create? We'll take a look at what Freemasonry is charging itself to do in order to assist in this time of high strangeness and COVID-19. But first, we're going to hear about the esoteric lesson of the Shriner's degree, according to one Manly P. Hall. Keep your dial tuned within due bounds.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back. This is episode number 439. In the news this week, same stuff has been going on. I guess if you're listening to this way in the future and you're like, what's going on with Masonry in this time? The spring of 2020, there's some kind of disease going around. I wonder if people will look back and listen to things like this or read articles and just try to contemplate and wrap their minds around what's going on. It is unprecedented in terms of the way we live today and the disease that's going around, the coronavirus, and it's shut down most of Masonry. However, there are answers out there, and there are things you can do to fulfill your Masonic education, the reason for the craft, right? And a wonderful resource is if you have Facebook, or even if you don't, create a burner account or something and get in there and head on over to the Refracted Light group. The whole purpose just for that group is to share online resources for practicing Masonry. In addition, whether it survives past this, we don't know, but really it's a great place to go and find WebEx, Zoom, Google Hangouts, online meeting places where somebody is presenting a Masonic topic. Now, these are open to the public, so they won't get too deep, but it is a whole lot of fun. You can join these meetings from your desk, your phone, put your headphones on if you want, but it's really cool, and it's really actually providing quite the resource for most folks. So to that end, I wanted to share a little bit about my experience, and I'm very lucky I get to work from home, so my job is completely remote as of right now. It usually isn't. I go into the office every day, but I figured I would just share with you a couple tips and tricks that I have to get through the days. Now, working from home sounds, brilliant, like it's some great, wonderful thing, but there are challenges. But aside from those typical challenges, locking yourself in a room, clearing a space, yada, 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 it's really important that in order to have good mental health these days, you have some kind of structure to your day. Normally it was getting up, showering, shaving, going to the office, or getting up, showering, makeup, going to the office, whatever the case is. But my routine is usually that I'm up by 6:45, 7 a.m. I get up, I walk downstairs, this is my new routine. I wake up at that time. I try to sleep till 7. I go downstairs. I pick up the first floor of the house, and I go make some quality coffee. So maybe that's something you enjoy, coffee or tea or something in the morning, some sort of little indulgence in terms of that. I do that. I get to look forward to that coffee. I go over and I bought one of those robot vacuums, so I turn on my robo vacuum and I let him go all around the first floor of my house. I named him Rick. So I run Rick, and then I go and I pull all the blinds open and I let all the sunshine come into the house. I go into all my son's rooms and my daughter's room, and I open all those up so that the sunshine can pour in and let them wake up naturally. And then I come upstairs and I go through my routine in my office, which is and I should mention I have a daily checklist for this, right? So run Rick, the little vacuum check mark, 5-minute meditation. I do Lumosity. They have a good program on kind of keeping your brain sharp. They have a free version, which you play 3 brain games If you want the paid version, it's like $60 a year or something. And that's 5 games and takes like 5 minutes. And then I practice my Italian every day, so I use a program for that. I make sure that I play 20 minutes of guitar every day, so I get some music in there. And then you're like, oh, well, this all sounds like work and study. Nope, I've got a block of time that's dedicated to video games. So I have a Switch, a Nintendo Switch Lite, so I just pop that out and I play like 20 minutes worth of video games or play till I die and put it away. Read a chapter of my home book that I'm reading. So right now I'm reading a book on Charles Ledbetter. Then I'm reading a workbook. So I basically put together different kinds of reports and build programs within Excel. So I'm reading a book on VBA. I watch a video on Tableau metrics. I watch a video on Alteryx. Then I share any kind of articles that's been posted on Midnight Freemasons or other relative sites that I think are insightful and cool. Then I work on my Bodo work also, my Builders of the Addendum, so I color a tarot card or something. And that's just the daily, in addition to your regular to-do list. So these are the things that I check off throughout the day. I don't go straight down the line and do all this. It would take me, 2 hours probably. But to have that great structure and to just do something and make sure you're integrating things that are fun, also go for a walk. That's also on my daily is walk outside. So right now, my neighborhood isn't terribly populated, so if I'm walking, there's nobody around. So I will just go out, make sure I maintain my social distancing and go for a walk. But those are just some things. Maybe that will help you in deciding what you need to do, or to help you if you've got some blues going on, or you're a little bit bummed out, depressed, or whatever the case is. Maybe that'll help you. So keep a to-do list, keep a daily checklist. I also still journal write daily. I wake up and I do all the same things I used to, only with more purpose now, right? So there is still a reason to shave. There's still a reason to put pants on, to put my watch on, to put my pocket knife in my pocket, to put my wallet in my pocket. All these things. So just make sure that we're doing those things and keeping a good mental attitude going forward. I think we're definitely at risk of losing a little bit of something that we are if we're not going to continue to try to practice a good balance in light of what's going on. So I want to also say that through this entire unprecedented quarantine, shelter-in-place rules that are going worldwide, I want to remove all ads from the show. So we're not going to be playing any ads or anything through this entire time. There are people out there that have lost their jobs and all this kind of thing. So we're not running ads this whole time, but I do just want to say thank you to those folks who are keeping this podcast going in the past, through this unprecedented time, and also into the future. So many thanks goes out to our patrons and our PayPal subscribers, whether you are contributors, fellows, or producers. Thank you guys so much. If you're interested in that, head on over to wcypodcast.com and see how you can help. So let's get into this week's first piece. Now, this first piece comes straight out of a magazine called The All-Seeing Eye: Modern Problems in the Light of Ancient Wisdom, a monthly magazine written, edited, and compiled by none other than Manly P. Hall. This one's from June 1923. This magazine is not sold, it says. It was a magazine that was put out there to just assist anybody who wanted to read it. So the article is called Occult Masonry. Now, keep in mind, Hall wasn't a Mason when he wrote this, so there may be things in here that sound funny, weird, maybe they sound clandestine, or whatever the case is, but there's definitely some great knowledge and insight within this piece. So let's go ahead and get into it. Occult Masonry, the Shrine. Among the Masonic crafts, there are many wonderful degrees, but none has a deeper or more beautiful sentiment than the Mohammedan shrine. Let us drop for the present the social side of Masonry, for it is only an accessory which means nothing to true art and science of the active craft. The Mason is a builder throughout eternity, and in the beautiful degree of the shrine, a wonderful thought is given to him, which should assist him to better thinking and better living. Otherwise, its profound significance in Masonry is lost to the craft. Let us go back to the ancient peoples where practically all of the modern symbolism had its origin, and here we find many wonderful facts concerning the mystery of the shrine. Man is eternally a worker, but to what end? That is a question which only mystics and philosophers can answer. What is the great reward for years of sorrow and labor? What is a man's recompense for his works and his life? The answer is that man is a builder of shrines. From the beginning of time to the end of eternity, man is building a wondrous altarpiece for his living temple. He is fashioning a wonderful and glorious decoration to adorn an empty niche. In other words, with thought, action, and desire, through his thousands and millions of years of growth, he is laboring consciously or unconsciously to a single end. This end is preparing a holy place to be the dwelling of the Most High. Therefore, in spirit and truth, a man is a shriner, a builder of shrines. Now, in many ways, man carries on his appointed destiny, and all through the ages he is building eternally many things, and on all planes of nature he is laying up treasures with which to adorn this wondrous altarpiece, the living shrine of his own soul. In India, there are many wonderful shrines of gold and jewels, brass and glorious lacquers, stone and wood, carved by the hands of the faithful into ornaments and decorations to embellish and make more grand the altars of the gods they worship. It is said that only the heathen build shrines, but we know that this is not true, for only the finest, the purest, the most noble of human beings can build a shrine, and not even the end of time, as we know it, shall bring to completion the shrine building of the soul. Now, the world, as we know it at the present time, is the great rough block from which man must cut this beautiful shrine. With love, compassion, joy, and a deeper understanding of the mysteries of life, he must take the brutal, the cruel, the rough, and the unfinished, and with the vision of the true seer carve with loving thoughts, joyful hands, and the contrite spirit, this rough and broken mass into the glorious shrine of spirit. Let man realize that he is building a strange and subtle thing, and a new power and zeal inspires his efforts. Its wonderful pillars he carves from the granite blocks of matter. With thought, word, and action, he decorates it and glorifies it until it becomes a thing of beauty and grandeur. Into the settings he has fashioned, he places the stones of knowledge and love, each flower, each little figure carved by loving hands for the glory of his God. And he works through the ages. He realizes that his own body, the world in which he lives, and the world of his friends and those around him are the material from which this shrine must be built. It is from the dross of his own soul that he must cut the golden key, and his own being must become the glorious setting to contain the most precious of all jewels, the pearl of great price and the philosopher's stone. Man is ever human, and being human, he is impatient, thoughtless, and unsettled as to the reason for his own being. Therefore he makes a great mistake, a sad and terrible mistake, yet who shall blame him for it? It is a mistake which seems almost godlike, and which sometimes even the masters make. And yet, how can we judge them? When man builds this sacred shrine, he fails to realize there is but one thing worthy to fill that hallowed spot. Some god of earth he seeks to raise to heaven's height, enshrined beside the infinite, a cherished thought, a loved one of this world who has called to him, or who has heard the whisper of his soul. But how can a god of clay fill a shrine of gold? The answer lies in the broken heart at the foot of the shrine, when the one we sought to raise to the height of a god proves to be only a creature of earth. How many hours and years of sorrow man must experience when he allows the human to fill the shrine of the divine? None can answer that problem save those who have seen the shrine shattered and the figure crumble which they worshipped as a god. Therefore the shriner learns that the sacred place is the dwelling of the Most High, and that there can be no other gods before him. As man labors through the ages to build the shrine, he must never seek to fill it with an idol of wood or stone, which he glorifies as the divine. For soon the beloved lies at his feet, a broken ruin, only less broken than the heart of the worshipper. Close to his heart, man must keep the one he adores deep in his soul, should he etch the picture of those who are dear, but never let him place within this hallowed shrine any save the living God. Our world is filled with those who have known the pain of a broken heart because something of earth came too close to the things of God. Broken we lie at the feet of our idols, crushed and disconsolate. And for years we do not labor with the shrine because it seems that whatever we build into it, a glorious love of life, is shattered into 1,000 places, and naught have we in our hands but broken clay. The soul of the dreamer is broken with the idol at his feet. The heart of love is cold as it sees the creature of its adoration fall, a heap of broken dust before it. But there is the mystery of the shrine. Through the ages, man is to build this glorious altar, but not to fill it. Man will never know, it seems, the glory of being able to fill that shrine with those adored. His is the work to build it, to finish it with all the beauty and grandeur that his soul may know. But forever the empty niche must face him, never to be filled. Forever he seems to be building a golden ring around an empty void, but from his hands there shall come a strange craftsmanship. The mercy seat shall be built into the shrine, and as the last touch is completed, and the architect lays aside his plans, the shrine builder shall kneel in adoration before his works and know, at last, the mystery of the shrine. In the heart of the altar he has finished. In the niche, that sacred shrine, a great light shall come and descend upon him. It is the light he cannot build. It is the presence of the Lord, which nothing of earth can give him. Whatever else he may worship becomes as nothing before that mystic thing, and whoever in this world he cherished no longer fills the shrine. For each loved thing has an altar. Everything we cherish has its own little worshiping place in the heart. The shrine of the soul is for the spirit alone, and when man has finished his work and built his temple after the order of the Most High, then shall the Spirit of the Lord inhabit it, and the shrine shall be filled forever. No longer will the idol crumble, for now the ideal fills the shrine. No longer will man's heart be broken, as those he trusts fail him in the moment of his extremity. For the presence in the shrine will never leave it, but as a pillar of flame by night and a column of smoke by day, the shriner is ever protected by the light of God. So in Masonry, we have the privilege and duty of building this mystic shrine, the living temple of the living God, and the beauty of this wonderful Mohammedan degree is as sweet and as divine as any Christian concept. So, seekers of the great light, let us make our pilgrimage to Mecca and there pay our homage to the green banner of the Prophet, and then, wrapping the veil around the turbans or fez, let us return to build more wonderful and more mystic shrines as we labor in the completion of the great one which is to be within us, the dwelling place of the living God. Let us worship in our own ways these gods. Well, there you have this piece on the mystic shrine and an interpretation of the Shriner's degree. And really what it does is it adds this flair to say that these are all held together by the same type of Abrahamic faiths, right, where it's the same deity across all of them. So Hall is basically saying in this degree that take the lessons, the mystic lessons from the shrine, and build your shrine to your God and worship there, but be careful not to put any man-made thing on the same level as the divine. So whether this is the idea of the Christian God, the Mohammedan God, the all power of the universe, the one that lives in the pleroma, whatever that is, make sure that we're not placing some materialistic concept or yourself on the same level, because even in the most Kabbalistic things, even in the most quote-unquote occult schools, man is still a reflection of the deity, even if he is considered the deity, if that makes sense. The next piece I have for you this week is one that I pulled from the Midnight Freemasons, and I thought it was a really great piece that was just compiled by Right Worshipful Brother Michael Jarzabek. Now, Mike is a member of several Massachusetts lodges. We're both members of Ezekiel Bates. They're in Attleboro, Massachusetts, but he's a past master of Brigham Lodge in Ludlow, Mass. He's also a member of the Meadows Lodge in East Longmeadow, and he's a member of the Massachusetts Lodge of Research. He's a past master and junior grand warden of the Grand Lodge of Masons in Massachusetts. So, junior grand warden. And what we're seeing online right now is a lot of master Masons out there, and groups are doing these things like toasting to absent brethren, things like this, right? And this is all well and good on this kind of superficial, hey, how you doing level, and acknowledging our distance. But what's more? And he wrote this piece called, Is Freemasonry Essential? Now, the word essential here is being defined as needed right now. And the word is popular because many states have something called essential workers. So our essential workers are our first responders, our medical staff, police, fire, people like this, grocers, people who continue to make life a living experience in these unprecedented times. And so Mike asks the question, is Freemasonry essential? Here we go. Now, I will say that there are 2 swear words in this article. I chose to leave them in, and just so you are aware, I will be using those words in the podcast unedited. So if you have little ears, this might be the article you want to pause and pick it back up later. It is a PG-13 word, but nonetheless we'll use it. Is Freemasonry Essential? By Midnight Freemason guest contributor, Right Worshipful Michael Jarzabek, past Junior Grand Warden, Massachusetts. Quote, Anti-fragility is a property of systems to thrive as a result of stressors, shocks, volatility, noise, mistakes, faults, attacks, or failures. End quote. In an article in the Southern California Research Lodge's Fraternal Review, Brother Angel Millar asked whether Freemasonry was anti-fragile. If it is, this crisis will be perhaps the best test of its resiliency. We often talk about great Masons. We often ask where the great Masons are today. When this is all over, will we have done our part? Is this the stage where those great men emerge? In this time of challenge, will we succumb to our base passions, rest on our laurels, or will we exemplify the values that we hold so dear? General George Patton gave a speech to the Third Army which may be extremely relevant to our current situation. In the speech, he talked about all men doing their part, whether as truck drivers or telegraph maintenance specialists. Towards the end of the speech, he said, quote, Then there's one thing you men will be able to say when this war is over and you get back home. 30 years from now, when you're sitting by your fireside with your grandson on your knee and he asks, What did you do in the Great World War II? You won't have to cough and say, Well, your granddaddy shoveled shit in Louisiana. No, sir, you can look at him in the eye and say, Son, your granddaddy rode with the Great Third Army and a son of a bitch named George Patton. End quote. We are all proud to see Right Worshipful Oscar Allen, Junior Grand Warden of New York, doing his part. We are aware of many others are doing their part as well. Many of us are deemed essential in one way or another. The current global situation makes me wonder if Freemasonry is essential. By Freemasonry, I do not mean just the structure, I mean the way of life. I say it is essential, or at least that it should be. Whether Freemasonry is essential or not isn't up to our elected leaders. It's up to us both individually and organizationally. What are we doing, or what can we do to make sure that we as Masons are doing our part? Our state and federal leaders have provided us with lists of essential activities. Freemasonry isn't on them. Let that sink in for a minute. It may be the most important lesson we learn in our Masonic generation. If we want to survive, we must stop being trivial. If we are going to thrive, we must do something essential. Freemasonry may not be on those lists, but there's plenty that is. Those lists aren't an imposition on our freedoms, they are an invitation to act, make masks, host online fundraisers for food banks, help support those that are working overtime to provide essential services. Whether we thrive is wholly dependent on whether we act. 30 years from now, what will we be telling our grandsons as they sit on our knee? For me, and I am sure many of you, it won't be that I shoveled shit in Louisiana. No, sir, I want to look him straight in the eye and say, I was a Freemason, and we did our part. It's time to pick up our tools and get to work. Mike Jarzabek. So I know we had some swears in there or whatever, but I think it drives home the point, right? That no, you didn't do something, for a couple bucks and, didn't help anybody for real. You didn't just sit there and toast online. You didn't just sit there and write checks to charities. You did something. And we have that ability to make a real impact. And so one of the things that I'm doing personally after I read this was I started researching exactly what Mike said. How do you make masks? How can I help? How can I do these things? And luckily I work in the healthcare industry, so I've also got some outlets there. But just something to think about. Let's be essential. The last piece I have for you this week is called The Mason's Mark by Wallace M. Gage, past master from the Maine Lodge of Research. Let's dive right in. A recent tour of England and Scotland included visits to the beautiful and stately Salisbury Cathedral, York Minster, Westminster Abbey, and to Rosslyn Chapel and Melrose Abbey. All had many quote-unquote Mason's marks carved into the stones and can be found in many other buildings still standing in Europe and the British Isles. These old Mason's marks help us to trace Freemasonry's story from its early operative days to the present, when it is used in a symbolic sense in the first of capitular degrees of the York Rite. Putting aside the legends of the old Gothic constitutions perpetuated in our present-day rituals, which purport to trace Masonry from the builder of King Solomon's Temple to Noah's flood or Cain and Abel, Masonic students in the last century or so have been able to document fairly accurately the evolution of Freemasonry as far back as the mid-14th century, when the first attempt was made to organize the Masons' trade in England and to establish work rules for its government. Our modern Freemasonry is an outgrowth of those operative Masons and of the Middle Ages, the builders of those ornate and beautiful examples of Gothic schools of architecture unsurpassed in builders' art. The Mason's mark has been found on structures far older than these, however, some going back to 2500 BCE. Little attention was paid to these carvings until 1841, when British archaeologist published an article on his studies. Masonic students took an interest in the subject and parceled the link formed between operative and speculative Masonry. It is surprising how long a thing may remain unnoticed until it has been discovered. When a number of Mason's marks were pointed out to an old priest, he remarked, quote, "I have walked through this church 4 times a day, 28 times a week, and never noticed one of them. Now I cannot look anywhere but they flit to my eyes." The operative Mason's mark was used for purely practical purposes. During the period when most cathedral, abbeys, and monasteries were built, there were few who could read or write. When he became a fellowcraft or a journeyman, each Mason selected his mark or design, which was his for life and was never to be changed. The mark thus served as a signature. He cut it into each stone he prepared so that he might be given credit and receive wages for his labor, and also be held responsible for the quality and proper execution of the work. The Mason's mark has similar objective to a trademark by assigning responsibility for quality of work. During the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church dominated the religious scene in Europe and Britain, and most of the work done by the operative Masons of the day was construction of cathedrals, abbeys, and monasteries for the Church. With the coming of the Protestant Reformation in 1517, however, the Roman Church lost much of its temporal power and influence, and the building of religious works fell off sharply. The operative Masons found themselves facing increased unemployment. Fewer apprentices were accepted to learn the trade, and work for the Masons left was limited, largely to military construction and repair work requiring lesser skills. The period of operative decline was the beginning of a gradual change from guilds of builders to the moral and philosophical fraternity which today we call, quote-unquote, speculative Masonry. Returning our attention to the Mason's mark, we find an early reference to it in the German Thurgau Statutes of 1462. They note that on becoming a journeyman equivalent of the fellowcraft, the Mason took his mark at the solemn admission feast. Later in Scotland, 1598, the so-called Shaw Statutes were placed in effect. A set of rules governing the operative Mason's trade were issued by William Shaw, master of the work of King James VI of Scotland. These contain the first known reference to the Mason's mark in the English-Scottish area, from whence our present-day Freemasonry has descended. These statutes say, quote, that no master or fellow of the craft be received or admitted without there being 6 masters and 2 entered apprentices present, the warden of that lodge being one of the 6, and that the day of the receiving of the said fellow of craft or master be properly booked and his name and mark inserted in the book. End quote. The newly passed fellowcraft had to pay the lodge 1 Scots mark for such registration. The fellowcraft was journeyman, fully qualified to do mason's work, and the master was a contractor or employer of the fellowcrafts, and who could take apprentices for training. In 1634, an event took place which was to profoundly affect the future of the craft. The minutes of the Scottish Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, for July 1, 1634, notes that Lord Alexander, Viscount Canada, Sir Anthony Alexander, and Sir Alexander Strachan were admitted members of the lodge. This is the earliest record of the admission of non-operatives into a lodge in Scotland or England, and it turned out to be the opening wedge in the transition from operative to speculative masonry. The earliest minutes of this lodge are dated to July 31st, 1599, and show the Mason's mark used in conjunction with the signature of one of the members present. By the following year, many marks appear in the minutes, sometimes unaccompanied by a signature. Minutes of other Scottish lodges also show the use of the mark, undoubtedly in conformance with the Shaw Statutes requirement. Following the admission of the 3 non-operatives noted above, the practice spread rapidly. In a period of decline for operatives, more and more non-operatives came to be accepted as members by most lodges, and the character of Masonry underwent increasingly rapid change. By 1670, for example, the lodge at Aberdeen shows minutes signed by some 49 members, about 3/4 of whom were non-operatives. Noteworthy was the fact that all but 2 had marks shown beside their names, indicating that the practice of choosing a mark was not restricted to the operatives. During this period, when activities are well documented in Scotland, English records are scarce regarding acceptance of non-operatives and make no reference at all to its use of the Mason's mark. This dearth of records makes it difficult to do more than guess at the chain of events which immediately preceded the most important event of all, formation of the first Grand Lodge of 4 old lodges in London in 1717, generally accepted as the historical dividing line between operative and speculative masonry. It established the basis of organizational pattern followed by all regular Masonic jurisdictions everywhere. Ireland followed suit, forming its own Grand Lodge in 1725, and Scotland likewise in 1736. At that time, English lodges were almost entirely made up of non-operatives, while in Scotland the operatives were still strong, but waning rapidly. Ritual played a relatively minor part in operative masonry, but with the transition to speculative, it developed and expanded and soon came to play an important role. We know little of it until the publication of the first of many exposures in 1724. None of them had anything to say about the Mason's mark, and the first indication we have of a ceremony or a degree being connected with it is the September 1st, 1769 minutes of Phoenix Royal Arch Chapter of Plymouth, England, where it states that 6 members were made Marked Masons and Marked Master Masons, and that each chose their mark. While the mark had been used in Scotland for many years, the first time we hear of its ceremonial aspect is in the records of St. John Operative Lodge in Banff on July 7, 1778. There is strong evidence that the mark degree was worked in America as early as 1782, although documentary proof is lacking. The development of the Marked Master Mason degree to its present-day status is a story in itself. At various times it has been conferred in the craft lodges by Scottish Rite, by Royal Arch chapters, by Templar encampments, and by independent mark lodges. In America, the degree was gradually absorbed by the Royal Arch early in the 19th century. Over the years, there have been other degrees based on the mark, such as the Markman, Mark and Link, Fugitive Mark, Black Mark, and others, but these have disappeared, leaving only the Mark Master Mason. Although the rituals may vary somewhat in different jurisdictions, they are basically similar. As the ritual of the Mark Master Mason degree developed, the Mason's mark came to take a somewhat subordinate role to the keystone and the theme of building of King Solomon's temple. The Mark degree now is a requirement for candidates for the Royal Arch degree in the United States, Ireland, and Scotland. The United Grand Lodge of England at one time voted to recognize the Mark degree as a quote-unquote graceful addition to the Fellowcraft degree, but soon reversed itself, which led to the formation of the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons of England, Wales, and the Dominions and Dependencies of the British Crown in 1856, which today has some 1,200 Mark Lodges under its jurisdiction. Only in Scotland is the Mark degree recognized as part of craft masonry. It may be, and usually is, conferred on Master Masons in the Symbolic Lodge. It is also a requirement for the Royal Arch degree, and the degree may be conferred in the Royal Arch chapter if the candidate has not already received it in Lodge. Our ritual for the 3 craft degrees is clearly based on the practices of operative masonry with symbolic usage of the working tools, the ashlars, the trestle board, lessons in architecture, and many others. Why the Mason's mark, an operative practice from the time immemorial, should have been omitted in favor of such things as the anchor and the ark, the beehive, etc., is difficult to understand. A possible explanation may be that most of those who composed our early ritual were English, who may well have been unaware of the mark in the operative scheme of things. Only in Scotland has it received recognition and been given its rightful place as part of craft masonry. Our Mason's mark is the Masonic equivalent of our signature. It represents our name, our character, our integrity, and our skills. When we sign our name or apply our mark to a document, letter, painting, or to a stone for the building of a cathedral, we stand up to be counted. By it, we say, in effect, quote-unquote, "This is where I stand, this is my work, I guarantee its quality, and I am proud of the workmanship it shows." In addition to our own Mason's mark, we have a responsibility in regard to that best-known Mason's mark of them all, the square and compasses. Although all of us wear it, or otherwise display it, thus identifying ourselves as Masons to all we come into contact with, in doing so we cannot help but project an image of Masonry to the public. When we wear this Mason's mark, the square and compasses, the world will judge the craft by our words and actions. Should we feel unable to live up to the tenets and principles Freemasonry stands for, we would be well advised to leave the Masonic ring or pin in the dresser drawer rather than damage the good name of the fraternity. It seems to be human nature for us to want to leave some sort of a memorial that future generations will know we passed this way. We find this in the graffiti scrawled on the walls of Pompeii and in Egypt, and on the subway cars in modern cities. It shows in the initials carved in old-school desks, and in the "John Loves Mary" cut into tree trunks, and in the "Kilroy was here" of World War II. We sometimes hear it said of a person that he quote-unquote left his mark, meaning he had made a lasting impression on some institution or field of endeavor. Yet there are varying kinds of marks left. George Washington and Thomas Edison most certainly left their marks on our society and civilization, but so did Hitler and Stalin. All of us can't be Washingtons or Edisons, but we can contribute towards the building of a better world. Our ancient and operative ancestor, in cutting his mark on a stone for Salisbury Cathedral, left a memorial which says, quote, "I had a part in building this beautiful house of God," end quote. By being better citizens, better husbands, better fathers, we can leave our mark on society by discharging our responsibilities to God, to our country, to our neighbor, and to ourselves. In our vocations, in our daily lives, and in our dealings with our fellow man, let's do our best to leave our marks only on good work, true work, square work, just such work as is wanted for the building of the temple. There you have some great history on the Mason's mark, stretching all the way back to the 1400s, the 15th century, to modern times and what we're doing. I know whenever I craft something, I do put my mark on things. If you don't know what my mark is, it's the mark for mankind in the runic system of alphabet, but really cool stuff. I love the history here and how we trace it through, and some of the linkages that we tend to make when we want to make the leap from operative to speculative. I think the jury is still out for me. I'm not entirely sure I believe all of the stories out there of how this happened. I think I have my own little story. Maybe I'll write that down at some point. But gosh, we all know what happens when we try to say something of a historical value and then we have no citations. So I'll need to have quite a bit of things to back up my argument. But nonetheless, a wonderful piece, and I hope you guys all enjoyed. That's it for this week. As always, I want you to take care of yourselves. Send me emails if you want to be pen pals or something. That's cool too. My address is on the website. It's a P.O. box. I don't check it all the time, probably once a month. So if you send something there, it's probably a little bit before I get to it. And I do apologize in advance for that, but thank you for your patience. Same with the emails. If I don't write you back, thanks for your patience. I will get to you, I promise. I'm more busy than ever now, right? Because on top of my job, I'm working from home. My kids are home. I'm writing curriculums every day for them because we don't have e-learning set up for the schools yet. So it's on me every day to come up with homework and things. So I have curriculums that I write every night. So thank God for Scholastic because they're saving my buns. I hope you guys are all doing the same. I know you're busy as well. And one last shout out and thanks to our contributors, fellows, and producers of the program. Can't do it without you. Want to know more? Go to wcypodcast.com. Learn all about that stuff by checking out the Support the Show piece. And that is it. Thanks so much for listening this week. Stay on the level, and I'll talk to you all next week. Take care. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.